Welcome back to Tact Talks. I'm your host, Jack Brandwood, and this is the podcast where I speak to some of the brightest and most influential people in the tech industry in the UK. This week, I sit down with the director over at Slalom Build, Pete Craven. We talked about all sorts from adapting to a new team while still guiding them in the right direction, how to have a people-first company, and how they structure themselves over at Slalom Build.
Sometimes people think consultants, all they'll do is come in, ask you a load of questions and write a document, which is just the answers that you gave them, and then present it back like it was their idea. It's not what we do at all. We come in and ask the questions and then actually get it done and build it.
For more information on this episode and Tact Talks, head over to tact-it.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the episode. Pete, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. You?
Good. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Really good. Look, I always like to start with and it does sound like a philosophical question, but who is Pete Craven?
Okay, yeah, good question. I don't know. I guess the basics. I'm director of platform engineering at Slalom Build in Manchester. I've been working in tech pretty much since I left university, so it's bounced around different consultancies, different tech companies, that kind of thing. Yeah, mainly Manchester based. I did a little stint in London and then came back to Manchester because it's just nicer in general, isn't it? So,
Yeah. So, how long were we talking in London?
about 3 years I was working with IBM,
Right.
just doing tech consulting around the country with them.
What was there anything in particular you didn't like about London?
Not as such. It's just it's very busy, very expensive. I like Manchester more because of the community feel. Like you feel like you actually know other people in tech companies in London because there's so many and it's so vast. You can talk to people and have no idea where they work, what they're doing. They could be like 2 hours away in London, whereas in Manchester, you're like, oh yeah, I know that office. It's literally next door to mine or something like that. It's just a nicer feel around here for the tech community.
Great point. Yeah. And as you said, you're director of platform engineering now at Slalom Build. Every great story started somewhere. And I did give you pre-warning on this. Could you do us a favor? Could you draw what you wanted to be when you grew up and talk us through it as you go? No worries. We've had quite a few different weird ones. Yeah. And if you were to tell me that you wanted to be director of platform engineering when you were a kid, then I'd be surprised. But
I don't even know that was such a thing back then. But yeah,
very true.
Okay, so I had kind of a couple of things that I wanted to do. So when I was like deciding on going to university, it was either going into medicine or going into computer science. So the computer science side was more because my cousin worked for gaming companies, so he used to always build me little games when I was a kid, like computer games that I could play with like my little face in it or something.
Oh wow.
So I was like, that's really cool, so I'd like to get into that. And then medicine was just because that's a cool industry. I liked things like House and Frasier, where he's like a psychiatrist in that.
Yeah.
But I quickly realized I don't like blood, so that kind of ruled me out of doing the doctor side. So instead I thought I'd go into tech, but I didn't really understand what I'd be doing in tech. I kind of wanted to go into the gaming industry as well, just to follow my cousin. But then I just thought I'd do anything cool in tech, essentially.
Yeah, and they are usually quite people who go the tech route is always sciencey, surely.
Yeah,
always sciencey. Yeah. But never good at art. I've come to find out by doing this exercise.
No, I think that's a specialist skill that we don't have. So yeah, I guess I don't know what to draw for this. Probably just me on a computer, to be honest. So
perfect. However you do it, I guess with development there is an element of creativity and art, right?
Yeah, definitely. You need to come up with creative solutions to things. A lot of it's based on, I don't know, either coming up with an idea originally, which you can then work with, or working with a client to kind of understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. So similar to art in a way where, I know at some point someone will say, can you commission this piece of art for me? And you've got to come up with what on earth does that mean? How does that represent this client? How does that fit their values? Things like that.
Sure.
So there you go. That's being on a computer.
That's brilliant, Pete. I will show it to the, obviously check the video out if you are listening on Spotify, but yeah, a really practical picture of you on a computer. I like it.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So you've always wanted to be in tech, really?
Sort of. So I did do a bit of a stint in like media production and things like that. So I did computer science at university,
right?
Which is I'll talk a bit more about like my opinion on like degrees and like coding schools and stuff in a bit later.
Sure.
Yeah, I did that at university. Then I moved into doing a very generic tech role when I came out of university, which I wasn't really interested in. It was a bit too simple, a little bit too doing the same thing again and again, just churning through exactly the same type of project. So I left that and I went into media production because I did little bits whilst I was in university with like the different societies and things like that, and doing some filming with friends and things like that. So I moved into that for about a year doing corporate video for Microsoft, so going and filming events and things like that. Did a little bit of work with Nine Lives Media, who are based in Manchester. Who do they do a lot of the documentaries and stuff like Channel 4 and things like that. So I did a bit of this, like only about a month with them, really, just seeing how like a production company works. But then I quickly realized, like, one, media is very, very competitive. There's a lot of people who want to get into that. You have to work for free for a good chunk of time, which I wasn't too keen on. And yeah, just finding paid work is very difficult in the media. So I went back into tech and found more of a path that suited my creative side as well as my tech side, rather than just doing like churning out the same thing again and again, which was to me quite boring.
Was this before IBM? Before you
Yes,
yeah, it was,
yeah.
right.
So I left doing the media stuff and went to IBM, where I joined their, at the time it was called Interactive Experience, which is the department I was in, but now it's just called IX. And they were the ones who do more like the product engineering, so all the cool, like doing web apps, doing UX design, all that kind of stuff. So I worked in part of that. Part of like my media background helped me getting into that role because it's more of a creative side of tech. Yeah, I moved into that and worked on quite a few different projects doing different things. So I mixed between doing like some like project management, some UX design, just general like all the bits of tech, like some architecture, some testing, and then going into actually doing like proper development tech lead stuff. So that's kind of where I built out my career on that, just from finding a project which I was able to just throw my creativity at, and also my tech side, and built all of that out. That's kind of how I got into it.
And how did you get because you're director of platform engineering now is your title. How did you get how did you start leaning more towards platform engineering?
So that was more when I joined Infinity Works. So I'd done some platform stuff back in IBM. So one of the projects I worked on, we built out the whole AWS infrastructure for it. And we brought like development in-house for them. So it was the full stack essentially is what I designed for that. And then when I joined Infinity Works, like they're a very cloud first consultancy. So I learned a lot more about like the cooler sides of like AWS and how to do things properly rather than how I used to do it, where I just hacked things together until it looked okay. So I learned more about like things like serverless architectures, all of like the native tools in AWS, Azure, GCP, stuff like that. And then from there, I just kind of learned the best practices, and that's kind of my driver rather than writing code. I was never much of a coder. I was always more of a architectural thinking. How do we make this thing work in the way it should work rather than just writing code all day? So I think that's more why I moved more towards the platform engineering architecture side.
Right. Okay. Got you. So the Infinity Works, and then was it where did you go after Infinity Works?
I went to Tech.
Tech.
Yeah, public sector consultancy.
Got you. And then now Slalom. So you've had a big chunk of your career in consultancy.
Pretty much all of it, other than like maybe a year or two. Yeah.
Wow. So what is it you love so much about consultancy work? Because it's not very very normal for someone to be just only do, well, there's usually a mix of product based in-house. Yeah.
For me, it's like you change jobs every project essentially, so you always get new challenges. So I get bored very quickly. So leaving me on something or with the same job for about a year, I'd be bored. I'd get bored after about 6 months, to be honest.
Right.
So I like to be able to mix it up. So part of consultancy is, you'll change projects quite a lot. So you can leave one company, go to another, but you're still working with the same team in the background. So that's really fun for me. And it's always a new challenge because each client has their own unique problems, their own unique tech stack, their own unique ways of working. So it's how do you then work with that, which is where like the creativity comes in, because it's like, okay, I need to adapt to fit kind of how they're doing it, but also be able to coach them into the best way of doing this. So for me, that's why I really like it. And you don't just become an expert in one thing. So if you work for a company who purely build like Java web apps, you become an expert in Java web apps. Whereas for me, every project would be a completely different tech stack. So you have to learn something new all the time. You have to constantly be picking up new things, figuring out the best way of doing stuff. So I find it really exciting being able to do that. And you just learn a lot about different companies. So I know weird things about like how Sainsbury's do their online sales, and like how the department for DBS, disclosure and borrowing service, how their entire back end works, and how they do matching for CRB checks and things like that. Stuff that you wouldn't really know unless you worked there and needed to know it. But part of my role is I have to understand the business and what they're trying to achieve. So I just learn all sorts of random knowledge that I don't need to know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, you get the security of a permanent role, but with the variety of loads of different companies. Yeah, very interesting. It's, but I assume there's certain people who thrive in a consultancy environment and certain people who don't, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely one where if you don't really want to be constantly challenged to pick up new things, it's probably not for you. If you're one of the kind of like, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. Like if you just want to become an expert in your field, then yeah, product company is perfect for that, because you will be working on the same platform, like changing it, adding features, maybe rebuilding bits, but you'll always be working in a similar tech stack. And you'll get like extreme domain knowledge. Whereas if you want to work in a consultancy, you have to be happy with the unknown, because you go in, you don't really understand the domain, you don't really understand their tech or why they've done things in certain ways, and have to try and learn it quickly and adapt to it. So you need kind of a very broad knowledge of a lot of areas rather than becoming a specialist. So the whole thing about like consultancy is being T-shaped. So you have very broad, light knowledge on lots of things, and then you might have an area where you're more specialist. So for me, it's like platform engineering is more my specialty. But across my broad bit, I know all bits about how to do UX, how to do different software design, even how to do like business analysis and things like that. You need to understand parts of that, just because your role is, even if you're just an engineer on a team, you need to be comfortable going to a client and saying, can you explain how this part of the business works to me and how I can understand it, going and talking to different stakeholders all the time. So yeah, it's quite a different role to being in a product company.
And how did you get to grips with all those different elements of tech?
Just doing it.
Yeah, right.
It's very much you just get thrown in and just do it. And you might be on a team because when we sell work to a client, for example, we don't know everything. We know, again, like a high level of what they're trying to achieve, what we think a solution could be, or what we think their current environment is like. But until we actually get in there, we don't know. So we might put a small team on it of, say, just engineers, because all we think we're going to do is help them build something. And then we get in and we go, oh, actually, you need someone to help with this or this. And sometimes that falls to the people on that team to start filling bits of those roles whilst they're there.
Right.
So you end up picking up all these different things. So you might not have a UX designer on your team, and it falls to the software engineers to kind of figure out how do you do UX correctly. But they can always fall back on whatever consultancy is, they can fall back on the other people in that to ask questions. So they might not be on your team, but you can always go back to this huge, vast knowledge from everyone else in the company to kind of go like, I need some support on how do I do this? And there's always someone who's done it a million times and knows the best approach, and they can advise you and you learn from them.
And I love that, and it's something I've never heard before, actually. So it's good to hear from someone who's never worked in a consultancy. So you've worked at a few different consultancies, now at Slalom, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything in particular that sets them apart from other consultancies in the same space?
So with Slalom Build in particular, which is the part I'm in, we're very much product focused. So we are product engineering teams. That's what we do. So we go in, understand your problem. We put a team in place with all the skill sets needed. So you've got like solution ownership, software engineers, platform engineers, quality engineers, your XD people, so like your user designers, stuff like that, and your data engineers. And we put the right people in place to be able to build a final product. We don't go with, some consultancies go with like the land and expand, or we'll never leave this place approach, whereas we go more, we'll build you this cool thing that you need to get your business into the place it needs to be, and then we'll hand it back to you, and we'll let you run with it, or we'll work alongside you to build it, and then skill up your teams to be able to support that. So I quite like that approach, rather than we're only engineers or we're just getting in to try and stay there and become part of that company so that we never leave. We don't really have that kind of ethos. And we're very much like a people first company, which is what I really like about it. So everything we do is about like making sure people are happy, like doing the right kind of roles for them. They're always getting like the right kind of development for their career and their profession. We've got the right training in place. It's just, yeah, generally a very supportive company from what I've seen of it. So that's why I quite like Slalom Build over like some of the other consultancies I work. Not that they're bad, it's slightly more of a people first, engineering second approach, whereas a lot of others are engineering and then people are doing it in the background somewhere.
Yeah, it makes sense. That must be an issue with how people view consultancy. Sometimes they're a bit like, oh, we know once you get in here that all you're going to do is try and stay here for as long as possible. And but I guess if you're going in from the get-go and being like, look, we want to get out of here at a certain point, a certain end date, that probably gives them a bit of, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely. Like, so Slalom itself is more of a consultancy, so that's where you've got your traditional like technical people or your data people or anything else essentially, and then Build is very more like we'll get in and just do it.
Oh,
so
cool.
that's where we're slightly different. Whereas sometimes people think consultants, all they'll do is come in, ask you a load of questions and then write a document, which is just the answers that you gave them, and then present it back like it was their idea.
Yeah,
it's not what we do at all. We come in and ask the questions and then actually get it done and build it. So that's what I like about it.
I was at the Reframe Women in Tech conference a little while back, and Kath Trotter was on the stage. She did, and she was speaking, and Slalom had this like really cool stand where you probably saw it, where everything was upside down, and it was really cool. But it was like all of a sudden Slalom just came out of nowhere. It was like, whoa! But there is a big presence in London. Is that right?
Yeah. So in the UK, we've got London and Manchester. London's the oldest part of the market, and then Manchester's newer. Slalom itself has been in Manchester for years, probably like 3 or 4, maybe more. I might be wrong. So, but Slalom Build is newer, so we've only been in Manchester probably about 1.5 years, something like that.
Got you.
So we're still a lot newer, and we're more the ones who go to meetups and like that kind of thing. So we're the techies.
Got you.
So we're the ones who go to all these techie events and things like that. But yeah, London's the oldest part of the Europe market, essentially.
And what's the plan for Slalom Build now that you've been there for how long?
Myself?
Yeah.
About 2 months.
2 months, awesome. Yeah. Cool. So you've been brought on. What's the plan now for Slalom Build?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So we're expanding across Europe. We've now got the Munich office, and we're looking to expand in some other European markets in the future. For UK, the focus is mainly on building out the Manchester market, so getting our name out there a bit more, winning more clients, getting our name across the tech community here to let people know that we're here and like we are looking for people, that kind of thing. But yeah, we generally only work with local clients, so we try to not make people travel essentially, so that's a bit different thing, which I also quite like. So we'll try and put Manchester people on Manchester project or Northwest project essentially. And London people work on London projects. So you're not commuting, you're not having to do any of that kind of thing. So yeah, getting our name out within the Northwest means that we can get more Northwest clients, so we can build more people who work on local projects rather than having to like maybe a couple of people working on a London project at the moment, when we could easily put them onto a nice Manchester project where they can actually go into the office every day and see people, whatever they need to do.
And that people first approach again, right? You're not disrupting someone's life just to put them in. Because that was the old thing in consultancy, wasn't it? They'd send you to like Blackpool for
Yeah, I spent 3 years in IBM living in hotels.
Did you? Well, there you go. What was that like? What was that like doing that sort of shift?
It's fun for like the first few months when you're like, oh, this is great. I've got like expenses for dinner. I'm staying like a nice hotel, stuff like that. And then you very quickly realize like, oh yeah, this is really tedious and not all hotels are great and things like that. So you might end up in the middle of nowhere where there's no restaurants and one hotel, or and you miss out on quite a lot of your life doing that, I think. So it's a lot nicer to not have to stay in hotels for 5 days a week.
Yeah, absolutely. You had an event recently at Mosey, and you mentioned you had a special guest that came, which I was like...
So we ran the Slalom Connect where we invited, I can't remember how many, but I think there's about 150 different people came from, not slalom people, but external, like clients from various companies around the Northwest came to kind of see what we do and just talk to people and get to know everybody. As part of that, we had a team from America. They came over and they do all of our really cool, like freaky AI, scary things and like robots and stuff like that. So we had 2 Boston Dynamics dogs, the big like scary dog things that they've got. Had them walking around and doing different things to like show that these are things that we do actually work with clients in the US to put in place to like, I don't know, go check on pipelines or go into places where humans can't go. So we had those walking around. We had these virtual people which you could talk to and interact with, and it was really scary how like natural it was talking to them. So all sorts of weird things like that they had there. Yeah, so that was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the videos of the Boston Dynamics dogs, and they're always there with the comments are usually very what's the word, Armageddon-y. Yeah, but I assume they probably weren't. They probably weren't doing anything crazy at the event.
No, they were just walking around and like picking up footballs and things.
It's still kind of scary.
It is a little bit scary. Yeah. Like I watched them go up and down stairs, and it's like that's really freaky.
Whoa, yeah, I get it. But that must be so valuable to show your customers the other stuff that you do. You're not just going into a business, and building a piece of software and leaving, but
yeah,
really multifaceted in terms of what you guys do. Then
yeah, so that's why I quite like Build, because we go in as the tech arm, but we've got the whole backing of all the other cool stuff that we do. Yeah. So we've got like the emerge teams who look into all of the scary new technologies and things like that. We've got that Element Lab who play with robots all the time and can come and showcase that. We've got just teams that do a little bit of everything. So if you're ever talking to a client and go, it'd be really interesting to do this, things like I can probably find someone who knows how to do that, and go and talk to a random team, because we're global, so we've got teams like everywhere who we can go and like pull knowledge from.
And what's the plan for Europe? Why Europe? What's brought that on?
I mean, I think it's just because it's a good market to be in, right? So a lot of Europe, like they're getting more techy, and like you're getting more small tech companies like spinning up in different places. Like the UK has always been quite a good tech hub anyway, so we've already been kind of an established market in that, and a lot of different European cities are the same, but there's certain ones which are getting more and more techy. So you've got like Lisbon, who's become like this incredible place for remote working. So you've got loads of techie people going and living there, like going to the beach and then going home and doing some coding and stuff like that. So I think it's just a market that we've not really been part of. So now we're trying to get more into it and show like we can come in and do engineering for all of these other cool companies across Europe.
So how quickly have you grown in Manchester?
I checked this morning. I think we're currently on 40 people, and that's been in about a year.
What, from 0 to 40?
For Build, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. 40 people in a year. That's pretty crazy. What's the secret? I know you've only been here for a short period of time, but you must have heard.
I think it's just because we can offer cool projects. I think that's what helps. I like just finding people who are interested in doing different things. So we did run some like academies and things like that, where we brought in people from like maybe not a tech background, or people who are fairly new to tech, like train them up to be able to do the roles that we want to do, and can put them on projects with seasoned vets who can coach them alongside it. And then there's also just the same variety of things, and just a general quite a nice place to work. Yeah. So I think that's kind of helps. Like the whole people first approach is really nice for bringing people in, because like techies can get a job anywhere. You need to give them a nice environment to work in, otherwise they'll just go up the road to somewhere way nicer.
Yeah, so true. It's such a competitive market, but it has been for ages. But I think it feels like it's getting more and more so, but kind of in a good way, because people, I think companies are continuously like iterating on what they're offering techies coming in and what people coming in general. So, which is great, and that in itself is pretty. To iterate continuously is pretty agile and pretty techy. Yeah. Anyway, me talking like I know what I'm talking about. Another thing we spoke about as well, obviously the amazing stuff that's happening at Slalom, and is very, very exciting. But I think what you said to me, a particular passion project for you is getting more people into tech. So I guess where does that come from? Because you had quite a traditional route into technology, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did this partly at Made Tech as well. So my whole thing was trying to build the market there, and now I'm doing that in Slalom Build. So it's, for me, like bringing in people who are really passionate, because you don't go and pay a coding school if you're not passionate about something. So the people who come out of them are just amazing. Like they're the ones who just want to learn constantly. And some of my favorite people have been like the junior engineers who have come along from these things. And then you just throw any problem at them and they just want to learn more. Like to the point where sometimes you're like, you just need to calm down and like go away for a minute because I've got stuff to do. But they're so passionate to learn. It's great. So yeah, just trying to find more people who are into that. Like the university approach is good depending on what you want to do. So like I didn't learn coding much when I was in university. We did like some basic coding. But I wouldn't say I could come out of that and comfortably do the level that some of these people who are coming out of coding schools could do. I can tell you all about like how a processor works or like how 2G works, but no one cares because most people don't go into roles that do that. If you're going to go and do, I don't know, like work for, I don't know, like Samsung making computer chips, then yeah, that's the right route to go. If you want to go more into software engineering, computer science probably isn't the right thing for that. Like you learn a lot about like how to like make things efficient and work quickly, but you can learn that on the role from someone who's more experienced. Learning the like how to code properly, how to use all these millions of different tools and languages and things like that. I think you learn better in like coding schools or academies where you're focused on learning that rather than, I don't know, here's how to write a database schema. Like no one cares. That's something you pick up later on. Whereas learning how to write code first is probably the better approach. So yeah, so I'm quite passionate about trying to bring in people from those backgrounds, just also because you get a more diverse group of people rather than people who've been to university. You might get a more diverse background in like a coding school, for example, because they're people who've like come from other companies, other like parts of the country, all sorts of things who've all just like diverged on, I want to become good at this one thing. Whereas university, it's everyone's trying to learn different things because we've all got our own like ideas of where our career is going to go. It's like when I came out of university, a load of people went off to say Oracle or something like that to work on systems for there, or would go off to Microsoft to get stuck in the Microsoft team building, I don't know, whatever Microsoft builds now, all sorts of cool things. But in terms of actually people who just wanted to go, I just wanted to be a great coder and go and do more code. I think coding schools are just better for that.
It's definitely a great stepping stone for people, right? And coding schools is like the most popular route into tech at the minute. But I was at the Manchester Tech Festival and there was someone there who had done an apprenticeship. I can't remember where it was, but she was fantastic and she was talking about her entry into it. And there was a great statistic around if you hire someone through an apprenticeship into a tech role, there's a percentage of how much you retain them. I butchered that really badly, but basically, it's very likely to stay with you if they come through an apprenticeship. Same with I think like a coding school. If you give someone their first job in technology, there's going to be a certain loyalty to you that you've given that opportunity to get stuck in.
Yeah,
I always think as well, and I never went to uni to computer science, but do you feel like nowadays that there's so many different languages to choose from? Do you think there's a bit of like a choice paralysis when coming out of university?
Yeah. 100%. Even when I came out of university ages ago, it was still like I wouldn't really know what to pick first.
Right.
And there wasn't as much choice back then, or there was like certain ones which were the go-tos, but now they're seen as no one really wants that anymore. Whereas now the thing with like coding, like anyone will say it, is they're mostly all the same. Once you've learned logic, you can kind of figure out each one. But if you specialize in one, you learn all the like the shortcuts and the cool things it can do and how to make it more efficient. That's where like your specialism comes in. But if you go to a coding school and they teach you Ruby, Python, JavaScript, Java, whatever, you'll be able to pick up other things. You just need to learn like those basics. And then once you start focusing on one and work with someone who's more experienced, you can be like, you can actually do that with just this one line of code. Then they become a lot better at it. So it's the same for like platform engineering. Originally people who go into like platform engineering, you go like, if it's AWS, and you go like, okay, this will run on a big EC2 instance, and then we need it to scale. So we will do 2 big EC2 instances. And then when you actually work with someone who knows a bit better about these things or knows the best practice, they go, probably don't want to use EC2 instances ever because that's really old and antiquated now. Actually do it with like this native tool, which runs like Kubernetes, or do it in a serverless approach or whatever it will be. So you pick up more from on the roll. I think the schools are great for just teaching you the basics. So I wouldn't really worry about what you learn. They're all the same.
I mean, like there's so many different titles now as well, right? I mean, platform engineering or DevOps or agile delivery scrum. They were never around back in the day. Why do you think that is, by the way? Why do you think that there's so many new titles now?
Part of it, I think, just because there's a lot more on engineers now than there used to be. Like when people used to just write a huge web app or a huge monolith application, there wasn't much you could do with it. You just go, okay, we'll pass it over to someone who knows how to run a Linux server and they'll stick it on there and it will all work. And that was all you needed. Whereas now, especially with like more like the DevOps methodologies for things where engineers should understand the full stack and like how they should run in certain places and understand like microservices or different approaches to building things. I think that's where it's got more complicated. I don't know whether we need as many roles as currently exist, because it is a bit too complicated now when it really could be condensed a little bit. But in general, I think it is just like there's a lot more on the engineers now than there used to be. Like they do need to understand agile methodologies, they do need to understand DevOps methodologies, they need to understand the cloud, they need to understand different languages. So there's a point where you kind of go, we either need to break this into lots of different roles or we just call everyone an engineer and just hope for the best.
Well, and hope they're T-shaped in some way.
Yeah.
That's relevant to, yeah.
Yeah, or if they can just pick it up. I'm not sure which is the best approach, really. The roles do get confusing, though. Especially every company calls them all something slightly different, or a senior engineer in one company is very different to a senior engineer in a different company. So even the seniority levels are all over the place.
And like the principal title as well can sometimes be really confusing, right? Again, it can be a very grandiose title sometimes and sometimes not. You get a lot of banking, you get VPs of engineering that you're like,
Not really sure what that means. But
yeah, me neither. There's a couple more questions and I promise to let you go. Has there been a person that you've crossed paths with in your career that's had a big impact on you for where you are now?
Yeah, there's a few people. So one was a guy I worked with in IBM who kind of introduced me more to like the agile ways of working a little bit. And generally he was the one who helped me build out the whole like approach we wanted to take on some projects when we literally went with like, they have no engineers or understanding of tech or agile or anything, to actually introduce them to like, here's how we could do it. Here's how you could actually bring engineering in-house. So that really helped me because that gave me like the full project life cycle, which I hadn't seen before, that I've taken it literally from doesn't exist at all, even in someone's mind, all the way to that's deployed and real users are using this service. So he was really valuable. And then in Infinity Works, and anyone who knows Infinity Works probably knows the Harper twins, who are just the greatest people alive. They're like the friendliest people. They know everything about tech. It's incredible. So I learned so much from those two. Like they taught me everything about platform engineering, like best approaches, and just great coaching essentially.
And they have amazing shirts as well. Always.
Yes, everyone knows the shirts. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're probably the main people who've kind of like jumped my career quite rapidly. It's just from learning from them and their approaches to things.
And look, last question, and then I'll leave you alone. Today's your last day on Earth. It's not, by the way. Just imagine it was.
Yeah.
Imagine today was your last day on Earth, and apart from being on this podcast and spending time with family and that sort of thing, what would you be doing?
Oh wow. Okay. Probably try and visit as many countries as I could in that day. If I could travel very quickly, I'd tick off all the little ones that I've been wanting to do. Because travel is like one of my main passions. So
wow,
there's a few places that I've got on my list. So if I didn't have a chance, I'd probably go and see those. Like quickly go and run around Canada as fast as I can. Nip over to like Japan and just go around Tokyo and stuff like that. Go to Australia and chill on the beach before the end. So that would probably be it.
I love that. Where's the favorite place you've been so far?
Probably Cambodia. That's like the coolest one I've been to, just because it's so different to anywhere else I've been. The coolest that everyone's always impressed is I went to Chernobyl.
Whoa,
so
did
that
you?
was very cool to see. Yeah.
Oh wow! Because apparently the clothes still in the reactor, they're still radioactive.
Yeah, the fireman uniform is all in the basement of the hospital. Yeah, and they're all still massively radioactive.
What was it like?
It's eerie. It's a very eerie place, but it's amazing to see. It's like being in a film set from like a dystopian future film or something like that. It's very weird.
Whoa. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm very jealous. And Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And I think people will probably see Slalom Build popping up more and more and more as the months go on. And and excited to see where they are in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll catch you on the next one.